can the United States avoid a recession? Because, like I said at the beginning, we know that China, Germany, India, Brazil, these places that are huge economies are really struggling. And and a lot are in contraction or headed towards contraction. Unemployment rates spiking, exactly what you would expect with a recession. But so far, the United States has totally been the outlier, for sure, if you trust the data. So, what I've always asked is, okay, what are the probabilities that we just stay on our little secluded island and the whole world kind of crumbles around us while our economy just continues to boom? I mean, it's not a zero probability. And obviously, it's not a 100% probability. So I was actually having this conversation the other day with my good friend, Mike Maloney. And we were in Dallas. And he said, George, I've got something I think you're going to like. So he went over and pulled out, I believe it was on his iPad or something like that. But this was a page from his most recent book. So I want to give him 100% of the credit here. If you like this, go check out Mike's book. I know he worked on it like many, many years. But let's go over to this chart that Mike did where he spent hours and hours and hours doing the research on the major global economies and then going back to like 1980, looking at every single recession to see how common it was for the world to be in a recession when the United States was in a recession or vice versa. Really interesting stuff. So here is Mike's work. And on the left here, top left, we got Australia, Austria, but I'm not going to read them all. But the major economies, at least the kind of the major developed economies in the West, I think is kind of what he is focusing on. So when he goes all the way back to 1970. So this would have been the early 1970s recession. So the United States went into a significant recession, severe. But you notice the rest of the world, nada. Sweden caught the tail end of it. But that was really something that was pretty much exclusive to the United States. This is probably the 74 recession right here, where you can see this took in a lot of the world. So, I mean, Australia avoided it, Canada avoided it, Japan, Korea, Mexico, Norway, that's about it. So you could say that this was definitely a global recession. Moving forward to 80, 81, 82, that time frame when Volcker increased interest rates, it's similar. I would say it's kind of a 60% of the economies were in or went into a recession around that time. So a little less as far as a percentage versus the 1974 recession that we had in the United States. Okay. Now let's fast forward to the early 1990s, and very similar to what we saw in the early 1980s. I'd be curious what Canada was doing here. So Canada, yeah, they got hit with the 80 and the 90, although they avoided the 1970s or early 1970s. But as far as a percentage, maybe a little bit more than we saw in the 1980s, early 1980s, maybe call it 65% of the economies listed here, maybe 70%, actually were in recession along with the United States. Now, fast forward to .com, and pretty sporadic. And this makes sense because that was really kind of a balance sheet recession within the United States. The NASDAQ blew up, our stock market went down, and it really didn't impact these other economies. Now you say, George, why did these other economies go into recession? Likely because they were so heavily invested in the United States stock market that their aggregate purchasing power took a big hit as well because of their exposure to the NASDAQ or U.S. equities, let's say. But outside of that, their economy wasn't really impacted to a big degree. Then we go to the GFC. That would be 100%, not 99%, 100%. Then we fast forward to the cerveza sickness. That would be almost the same with the exception of Sweden. That's weird. That is really weird. I wonder why Sweden avoided a recession. That's it. Maybe because they didn't lock all of their citizens up in a cage. So, note to self, note to future self. Next time we have a global pandemic, it would be highly advised that the authoritarians and the central planners didn't lock their citizens in a cage for 2 years if our objective is to maintain economic productivity. Now, if your objective is to gain power and to reduce the population of the world, and if you are a Malthusian cult member, then that's probably not your objective. But if our objective is to maintain or hopefully increase the standard of living, note to self, don't lock people in a cage for 2 years. Anyway, getting back to 2020, straight across the board. Now, obviously, this is going to be a result for the most part of what we just said with the governments. But Mike's point is, or his hypothesis, is to look at what happened during the GFC and ask, why was there such a big difference between 2008 and let's just say 2000 or 1990 or 1980 or 74? The world linked by the financialization of global economies. So as these economies become more and more financialized, what happens to their banking system? It becomes more and more interconnected. And therefore, the monetary system is basically one. It's not like you have a monetary system for the United States and Spain and Germany and China. No, it's pretty much just one monetary system. And if it's one monetary system and one banking system, then for the most part, it is one economy. For the most part, obviously, there are differences. So, in looking at this and knowing what we know about the interconnectivity of banks and the financialization of global economies, which obviously include the United States, you've got to ask that first question again. What are the probabilities the United States avoids a recession if all these other countries go into a recession or economic contraction? My answer would be low, very low, but not zero, but not zero. So hats off to my good buddy, Mike Maloney. He said that just took him probably weeks, if not months, to gather all of that information and actually put it into a chart. So again, if you haven't picked up Mike's book, you definitely need to do that. The Great Gold and Silver Rush of the 21st Century. And that's, you'll find that chart right in that book. Hey guys, I'd like to personally invite each and every one of you to attend this year's Rebel Capitalist Live. This is the incredible conference I put on annually that helps you build a bulletproof portfolio. It helps you increase your personal freedom and liberty, and also it helps you increase the size of your network. In other words, you get to meet a lot of like-minded individuals, fellow rebel capitalists. It's in Orlando, May 23rd through the 25th. Past speakers have included people like Robert Kiyosaki, Ron Paul, Peter Schiff, Mike Maloney, Lynn Alden, just to name a few. So to get your tickets ASAP and to find out who is speaking at this year's Rebel Capitalist Live, you can check it out at rebelcapitalistlive.com. And just a little quick insider information, if you get your tickets sooner than later, you can get a discount because as we get closer and closer to the event, the tickets go up in price. So don't wait. Go to rebelcapitalistlive.com right now and get your tickets, and I will see you in Orlando, May 23rd through the 25th.